Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Erin Smith, the Marketing Manager at Patterson Dental, and we are so excited for this webinar today to share helpful tips and best practices with you so you can learn how to continue connecting with patients and filling your schedule so you can continue achieving growth and success in your practice. Our expert with us today is Lori Boyer with Solution Reach. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you so much, Erin. I'm very excited. I'm going to go ahead and just dive right in as we have a few more people kind of joining us. But this is a really awesome topic and something I'm very passionate about. So I want to make sure that we take all the time we can. The title for our webinar today is Win Back 2020, Leveraging Hidden Revenue Opportunities. And the reason that we're kind of talking about winning back 2020 is because, we've all had kind of some rough times this year, and there have been some revenue issues lost. And so I wanted us to go over some of the really great ways that we can find additional revenue and make up for those losses. As Erin said, I'm Lori Boyer. I'm a content marketing manager at Solution Reach. Basically, what that means is that my whole job is just about education. I'm kind of a resource for you guys. I spend most of my time kind of buried in research studies and learning about the latest trends that are happening in the industry, putting out articles and blog posts and videos and everything I can to help you know the things that you can do to best run your practices, even if it has nothing to do with what Solution Reach does. My job is just kind of to be a resource for you. So this topic is really exciting for me because it's right up my alley. A couple of housekeeping items before we totally dive in. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to put it into the chat. You'll see there's a little box where you can put that. In addition to Erin and I also have Alan Miller. He's one of my favorite coworkers here at Solution Reach. He's there helping man questions and run our polls for us and some of those things. So feel free to jump in. Let's make this back and forth. Everyone just doesn't want to have Lori talking at your face for an hour. So please jump in and we can kind of make this an interactive thing. Alan would also love if you connect with us on social media. He is over all of our social media. So we're on all the social media platforms. We're there on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. I totally recommend hopping over and joining the conversation. You can talk with other people in the industry and get lots of great resources and advice on those channels. Finally, if you happen to be a Solution Reach customer and you're looking for some sort of support, you can always visit us at community.solutionreach.com. There's lots of articles there. You can click on My Support. You can email us as well. So that being said, I just want to dive right in. Again, this is our agenda for today. But before we even start, I just want to talk about revenue issues with 2020. Healthcare revenue, as COVID hit this year, really, really plummeted, especially dental. Dental was hit the worst of all healthcare industries. And we were seeing revenue losses as high as 80% in some areas. Average was around 48%. And while, of course, I think most of us, and if it isn't true for you, share it in the comments, but most of us have resumed most of our kind of elective care. But revenue levels are not rebounded. And until COVID kind of goes away, or at least for the near future, experts are thinking that probably these revenue streams are going to be down. So that's why we put together this presentation. We wanted to help you find ways to get more revenue, to boost those numbers back up to where you want them to be. Fortunately, there are a lot of revenue streams that are kind of unknown or maybe overlooked, ignored, whatever it is. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So I want to remind you, you are going to get full copies of these slides. So you don't need to be taking feverish notes throughout the presentation. You will get a full copy of this. So that's for you to use afterwards. But the 8 main things we're going to cover today are optimizing your recall, taking advantage of insurance, making payment a priority, uncovering and alleviating patient fears, adding new services, looking at the small things, giving your schedule a boost, and expanding your telehealth options. So these are some of the most proven ways to get some additional revenue. And we're going to start by talking about recall. Now, most of you probably have some sort of recall program in place. Obviously getting your patients in to be seen is pretty important for your revenue. So in response, we send out those reminders by text or phone or email, postcard, whatever people are doing, to remind patients to come back in, or to say, hey, you're due for your 6-month cleaning, or it's checkup time. That's great. But what we're going to talk about today is taking those recall programs that you've already got that are kind of often just, we sort of use a blanket approach to them, and honing in ways to optimize that recall so that you're getting kind of the best bang for your buck when you're doing recall. The first step for that is, so if I'm saying you're sitting down, you're like, okay, I'm going to go over my recall program. What am I going to do? The first thing is to focus on high profit margin procedures. I think from what I've seen as I've talked to different offices, especially in the dental industry, is we have such unique, every 6 months we need to come in for our cleanings, and we got to get our x-rays, and we tend to kind of just go with that blanket, you're due for an appointment recall. Where what studies show is if you can put your focus in recall messages on high profit margin procedures, you're going to come out way ahead. Not every appointment is equal, financially speaking, in every industry, but obviously in dental, there are procedures that are just going to make you more money than others. And for you, it may vary a little from place to place. But these are some of the ones that as I've done research and looked into the studies and different case studies and things like that. In dental, these are the ones that tend to be some of the highest profit margin procedures: teeth whitening, implants, braces, wisdom teeth removal, and crowns. So when you're doing recall, take into account your high profit margin procedures. Again, jump in the chat, tell me, are these things that you're seeing as high profit margin? Do you have other ideas of things that you're seeing are great high profit margin? Share those with us. I'd love to hear about that. But start your recall by focusing on these types of procedures. Once you've done that, the next stage in your recall should be to focus on people who have already been diagnosed but didn't follow through. So you told somebody they had a cavity, you said somebody needed to get a tooth pulled, and you just haven't seen them again. Okay, these are going to be, again, a higher profit margin for you than just generic preventative care. And there are a ton, I'm sure you guys can share, but there are a ton of people who don't come in and get care done after it's been diagnosed. 64% of Americans always do that, delay or skip care during an average year. And COVID has made that way worse. 48% say they've skipped additional care that maybe they would have gotten on a normal year, but they're not doing it this year. So reach out to those who have been diagnosed and haven't gotten care. That's number 2 on recall. The third step on recall then would be all your preventative. So, do you have those patients who have missed cleanings, or people who need to come in, and just any of that preventative screening stuff? That should be your final step in recall. And often we kind of mix those up and tend to focus only on that bottom level, but those tend to be not quite as high of a return as you would want. And finally, this is one that I've thought is really applicable to COVID-19, and that I've been seeing a lot as I've talked to different office managers, dentists, doctors. There are procedures right now that fit well with the fact that your patients, a lot of them are working from home or social distancing. So, for instance, are there people who maybe want braces? Do you have adults who've kind of expressed an interest in that? Well, maybe right now, when they're not seeing people so much, they're not in person, they may be more open to having that taken care of right now. Similarly, if there's conditions, they need to get some teeth pulled, they need to have some sort of care that maybe has a little bit of a recovery. Sometimes when we're just working in the office, it's be like, oh, okay, I'll take a day off or take 2 days off, but then it's going to be kind of a pain for the next week, and it's embarrassing if my face is all puffy, and what if I get bruising? But right now, while people are at home, it's just easier to work from home and have to kind of nurse some of that little recovery period. So in your recall, kind of think about that as well. Those are always great. Great ideas that I've heard from some dental practices that they're doing right now. Okay, so throughout today's presentation, I am, again, like I told you, I really want to be interactive and hear from you. So, automated recall program. Do you use automated recall? Let's go ahead. Alan, will you send out this poll for us? And I would love to hear just what you guys do in your own practice. If you're using automated recall, if you're hoping to do it, it's a really great thing. I don't know if you have heard this, but on average, studies show that if you use some sort of like automated recall, the average doctor gets an additional $100,000 per practice just annually, just from recall. So I'd love to see that. Let's see where we're at. Okay, Alan, why don't you go ahead and share those results with us? Okay, good. Very impressed. The majority of you are using automated recall. That is awesome. So as I said, take your automated recall and start tweaking it a little bit, optimize it so that you're going to get the best bang for your buck. If you're not using automated recall, it's super, super easy, you guys. It's a really good way for you to just go ahead and make some extra money with usually not even doing anything. So totally suggest you look into that in the future. All right, let's move on. So the next step of things that you can do to try to get a little bit more revenue during this time is to take advantage of insurance. It's that time of year. Can you believe we're already almost to the final quarter of the year? This year has been so weird, it's hard to even imagine, but we are. And as most of us do, we're getting to the end of the year, and that's the time where we start sending out those messages. Hey, don't lose out on your benefits, and don't forget. I think that's pretty standard for most practices. But where that's kind of a fun sort of like, oh, just throw it out this towards the end of the year idea most years, for this year, insurance can have the potential to bring in a lot more revenue than we sometimes take advantage of. And so it's really a necessity in 2020 to make sure you're focusing on insurance as we come up to this last quarter. And there are a few ways to do that. And when it comes to insurance, typically, here's what I recommend. If you can do a little bit of legwork, if you can put in a little hustle yourself, you're going to get some great dividends in the long run. This is true because studies show that most patients say they don't really understand their insurance, and they're not up to date with their insurance information, and they don't really know always exactly what their insurance covers and doesn't cover, and so on. So do it for them. This is my recommendation. Do a little work, find out for them. First thing to find out right now is which patients have met their deductible. At this point, a lot of patients are going to have met their deductible, but they may not even know it. So if you can get some sort of list of, look, here's 100 patients who have met their deductible, if you can combine that with some of the recall messages we talked about in the last section. So for instance, maybe there's a high profit margin procedure, or maybe they have diagnosed conditions that haven't had care. If you can reach out and say, hey, look, it looks like you've met your deductible this year and would really love to get that crown done. Why don't you schedule an appointment now so there's not going to be as much out of pocket for you? That's going to be way more effective than just sending out kind of blanket messages of, oh, come in and let's see you. So combining that with this makes a big difference. In addition to this, I wanted to say, find out in addition what kind of things maybe patients have coverage for. So my husband and I, we have 7 children, and it's a lot of kids to take to the dentist every 6 months. A few years ago, my husband and I sat down and I said, you know what, we have got to split up all these jobs of figuring out life. We both work full time. We've got a lot of kids, and that means there's a lot of stuff going on. And so he took over being in charge of the dentist. He is a crazy man. So he takes all 7 of them at the same time. Our poor dentist. I hope if you're on the line, I'm sorry. He takes all 7 of them in at the same time to get all their cleanings and everything done. And when he was in there recently, they said, hey, Joe, do you want to get fluoride treatments for your kids? And I can't remember how much it was. I'm sure you guys could probably tell me. It's X amount. And, of course, when you times that by 7, everything starts getting more expensive. It's kind of the story of our life. And so he's like, well, let me think about it. And then they came back and said, oh, wait, it looks like fluoride's, 100% covered by your insurance. And he's like, oh, great. Well, let's do that then for sure. I mean, obviously, if it's covered. But the thing is, he'd been going in for a couple of years with the kids, and that was the first time they'd said something. So what my thought is, in a day or so before, when you have patients coming in, it doesn't hurt to check and see what kind of things their insurance covers they may not know about, sealants or fluoride, like I talked about, any of those kind of preventative treatments. Let the patients know, hey, are you interested in this? Send educational reminders by email. This is standard. This is kind of what I was talking about before. We all typically send out our newsletters saying, hey, don't forget to use your money. But if you can kind of target some of these emails, so for instance, if you found, like we discussed earlier, a whole group that had met their deductible, you could send out an email to all of those people specifically saying, hey, you've met your deductible. Also, let's not waste those dollars, and send out information that way. Targeting your emails, the more specific you are, the more detailed information you can give people, the much more likely they are to respond and to come in. And this is kind of, again, a little bit what I talked about before, offering to investigate. And as I mentioned earlier, you can offer to investigate before the patient comes in, so you've got a scheduled appointment. You can offer to investigate additional treatments that they may have coverage for. However, I talked recently to a practice who had started to do this kind of just as a recall effort, that they'd send out little messages, text messages was what they were doing. They'd say, hey, your insurance covers more than you might think. Call us and we'll look into it and we can let you know what's covered. Again, this is all going back to the fact that people don't really know what their insurance does. And so if you, as an expert to them, can kind of share with them like, oh, you're covered for this, or you're covered for that. Did you know that you have braces, but when your kids are 19, your coverage is going to, expire for that. Maybe you should get them in now. This is a great way to also get patients in. And again, I always recommend combining. So if you're combining this with the fact that, hey, you've met your deductible, do you want us to look into what your insurance covers of any sort of preventative stuff or other care that you might want to get done? That's going to be even more effective. Okay, payment. We're going to talk payment for a minute. It's not my favorite topic typically. I don't know if there are any of us who are just like, I love calling patients and telling them to pay me. Nobody really loves the whole payment thing, but huge, huge, huge amounts of money are lost every year simply because patients didn't pay. I mean, this is a massive problem in the United States right now. However, there are ways to kind of up the percentage of people that you're getting to make payments. And fortunately, unlike some of the insurance and some of that recall kind of stuff, these are more of a let's push a button and set these on their way. These are a lot easier to do. So first thing I'm going to recommend is to follow up on denied claims. I was pretty surprised when I was reading a study one day that talked about the fact that 60% of payer denials never get resubmitted. I would have thought it was lower, but I do know that submitting claims is just a huge pain for everyone. It's a pain the first time around. Working with insurance companies can be a huge pain. So I get it. But the majority of these denials are actually due to like just little things like patient info was put in wrong, just things that can be easily corrected. That's a lot of money that can get lost. Typically, if payer denials come in, it's a lot harder to get it from the patient. So always resubmit those denied claims. Even if it's a pain, just do it. It's worth it. Look at the way you're requesting payment from your patients. This is another really crazy thing, but patients are a lot more likely to actually pay their bill if you ask for it in the way they want. In fact, collection rates are 25% higher just if you request payment in the way they prefer. So obviously ask them. I mean, that's the first thing. Get on your form somewhere. How would you like your payment requested? If you don't know, I would err on the side of electronic methods. 68% of patients prefer a payment request by text or email, something like that. You could also do it in the portal, although that's not quite as popular as like text or email. I can tell you from my own stories. My husband and I, several years ago, we, set all our bills up to just go on auto pay. So pretty much every month, everything runs automatically, which is great. I love it. It's made our life way less stressful and not have to sit down and go through all the bills each month. But that's meant for bills that are not set up on auto pay, which my dental bills fall under. Sometimes I don't read their envelope quite as quickly as I should. I'm super guilty when I tell this story. So I feel really bad, but sometimes I'll just simply miss it. But in my defense, I had to say that when they send me a text, which I have a couple of doctors who will then send me a text, Lori, you've got a $35 balance, or Lori, you have a payment that hasn't been made. I will be like, oh, shoot. And I immediately will shoot off that payment, call their office and let them know, oh, I'm so sorry. So I can testify to that. It's not always that people don't want to pay, but sometimes we just kind of miss it because we're busy and we are how we are. So in addition, though, there are times when people don't pay simply because it's hard times. I mean, millions of Americans are kind of drowning in medical debt and bills, dental bills, everything. So if you can offer to make it a little bit easier, that's going to make it a lot more likely that they'll make an effort. So payment plans, offering to keep their credit card on file, accepting outside payment vendors, that's things like Care Credit, stuff like that. If you can offer some of those things, people are a lot more likely to actually pay their bill. This being said, there's sort of a caveat with a lot of these. You have to let your patients know that these options are out there. I recently was talking to a practice who said, Lori, I don't know what is going on. We do offer all these things. We have all these payment plans and stuff, but nobody really uses them. And so I said, well, how is it that you're, telling them about it? I said, well, usually it's just kind of face to face. If someone asks or something like that, then maybe we'll let them know. That's the problem right there. The truth is, you got to get this information out there to your patients, or they're not going to do it, which means in turn, they probably won't want to have certain procedures done because they're afraid of the payment issue. So make sure that you are letting patients know of all their payment options by group messaging, newsletters, social media. You can put it on your website, You can even put it on the physical bills themselves, letting patients know what kind of opportunities they have. And here's the other thing I'm going to say. I deal with communication, helping practices communicate with patients a lot, and patients are frustrating. I'm one of those frustrating patients. I know I am, but we have to be told, 6,892 times approximately before we are going to actually get it in our brain. So keep communicating this. Don't just be like, well, I sent it out in a newsletter in June. I don't know why people don't know. You just got to go. You got to go across a whole bunch of methods, a whole bunch of mediums, and you've got to do it continually. Any sort of information you're trying to get out, you've got to continually share it, or else the people will always miss it. And in the end, there'll still be those who miss it, but just do the best you can. One practice that I talked to has started doing that they call their collection day. The name, maybe we should think up a new fun name, but because nobody thinks, oh, it's so fun to collect payment, but they love it at their practice. What they do is once a quarter, they all gather together. They make it kind of a party atmosphere. They bring in pizza every hour or so. They take a break and play games. And then everybody just sets goals to try to collect overdue balances. During this time, they also have rewards and incentives. So I think the way they did it was that the top person to bring in the most balances, they got a prize. But then there's also like group prizes, so that if the entire team can reach certain benchmarks, everyone gets a prize. It's just kind of a fun way to gather, and you just got to make it kind of a party atmosphere. And this seems to work really well. So this is an idea you might want to try. I would recommend not doing it more often than maybe quarterly. But if you don't even want to do it that often, you could do it annually or biannually, something like that. But it's a great way to kind of keep everybody's minds around the idea of doing collection days. Okay, so we're back to our polls. Alan, you can go ahead and open up this poll for us. Do you use electronic payment methods? This is what I'm super curious about, because I feel like none of my doctors seem to use electronic payment methods, at least to request payment. Obviously, they'll take my credit card or something, but maybe I don't know about it. So is it an issue of that they don't offer it, or is it an issue that they haven't communicated it well? I'm not sure. So I would love to see. I'm constantly, as I mentioned before, a big part of what I do is trying to keep my finger on the pulse of what is happening in the industry. So one of the reasons I like these polls is to kind of see where we're standing. So, all right, let's see where we're at. Wait for a few more people to vote. Get your votes in. Okay, great. Why don't we go ahead and close it? And Alan can share with us. Great. So it looks like we're doing pretty well. We're less than half are doing electronic. So maybe my doctors just aren't using it. It's something I think, though, as you're moving to the future, this is definitely something you're going to want to keep an eye on. More and more, just in general, people are tending to pay their bills electronically. I mean, this is a trend that's been happening over the last decade, but is accelerating in a huge way. So at some point, I think it's a good idea for you to look into electronic payment and see it. That way you can better meet the kind of expectations of today's patients. All right, so we're gonna get back. Let's see. Oops, okay, great. The next thing after payment that I suggest you looking into are patient fears. Okay, fear, I think, for you guys in the dental industry is something you already deal with on a regular basis. But we have really specific fears that are happening right now in response to COVID. I actually just read a study just yesterday that had come out that said 87% of people who missed appointments in this last year did so because of fear. They were afraid to go. And this is something that's happening across every specialty, from, of course, dental, but also we're talking optometrists and podiatrists and everything, even pediatricians. People aren't taking their kids in to get vaccinated. People are, even cancer, heart attacks. In fact, the CEOs of the Mayo Clinic and the Cleveland Clinic recently had a big article that I read where they talked about the fact that they're so concerned about people delaying care because of fear that the death toll could be as high for those people who simply missed care as it may end up being from the pandemic. And you can imagine if people aren't going to get checked when they think they have a heart attack, you can see how maybe they would be, a little bit hesitant to go get their teeth cleaned as well. So this is definitely an issue that every specialty is facing right now, and something that needs to be addressed. So the first recommendation I have for you is to send some targeted surveys to all your patients. Keep it short. Patients, we're a little bit of a impatient bunch, aren't we, these days in the world? So 5 minutes or less. If it gets too long, people just aren't going to fill it out. They're like, I should go watch Netflix. This is too long. So keep it short and be very specific. Ask why patients aren't coming in. You could ask, have you delayed care? If yes, which of the reasons? Maybe some check boxes: financial, safety, fear of the dentist in general, other. Leave a box for them to fill it out. When you do this, you're going to start getting an idea of what kind of trends are happening in your specific practice. This is going to totally vary based on where you're located geographically. So, there may, and not just geographically, but your demographic. So if you are dealing with a lot of older patients, or if you have young children, or if you're in a major city metropolis, or if you're out in a rural area, all of these are going to have impacts on what your specific reasons are. So that's why I can't just say there's a blanket reason. Unfortunately, this is going to be one you're going to need to find out for yourself. Once you find out, there's a couple of steps here. First, you need to address whatever issues you hear. If they're financial, let's get some of those payment options out there. Make sure that they're in place in your practice. If you have them in place, make sure that patients know about them. If there are safety concerns, if people are concerned about getting COVID, if they're concerned about the aerosols, if they're worried about if they're going to spread it to someone else, make sure first that you're following all the guidelines set out by the ADA and set out by your state and local areas for safety. And I know so many of you have been honestly just inspirational in the things you're doing. I hear of practices who are setting aside days for high-risk patients, practices who are, making sure there's only patients in chairs 1, 3, and 5, creating a distance, people who are having their patients not come in the waiting room, but text from the parking lot. All these kinds of things that you guys have put into place, that's fantastic. If you haven't put much into place, do so, especially if that's what your concerns are from your patients. But in addition, you've got to make sure it's super well known what you're doing. So it goes back to the thing where we talked about earlier on how patients just don't know about it. So maybe they're scared to come in, but have no idea all the precautions you're taking, even though you sent out a newsletter, or again, remember it's 6,972 times or whatever it is. You've got to just get that out there in every way, over and over again, especially once you hear what the issues are, what their reasons are for not coming in. Another really great way to uncover issues, and this is an all the time thing, not just during COVID, is to look at your online reviews. Okay, online reviews, they're kind of, we love them, we hate them. It's kind of like getting a note from somebody that they like you, or then finding out it's a joke. And, it's just it can make your emotions go up and down. First of all, negative reviews, I know we hate them, but they actually have a lot that we can learn from them. in every negative review, try to see what the actual issue is. Sometimes it's just people being irritable or being unreasonable. That's fine. But sometimes there really are things. We had a super fascinating, I should have been born in a different life as a data analyst, because I think that I'm just a statistics nerd. My husband gets annoyed with me always quoting stats from everything that I read. But our data analyst here at Solution Reach a year or so ago for me did a whole analytics of so many, like 1 million online reviews of different healthcare practices across the country to see if they could see trends where what the AI kind of smarty pants data analytics stuff they did would pull out words that seem to have a correlation to reviews being negative or positive. And it was super fascinating kind of trends you could see, whether, there was a lot of stuff about bathrooms, which I never would have thought. Just people don't like dirty bathrooms. There was stuff about cattle. The word cattle came up as a word that potentially could bring down reviews. And it's because people were saying they felt like cattle, that they're just a number, just getting pushed through. So do the same thing kind of a micro level for your own online reviews. Look at the bad ones and start looking for trends. If you're seeing something getting mentioned multiple times, that definitely means that of these 1 or 2 people mentioning it, there's probably 50 people who noticed it but didn't mention it. So take care of those issues. Online reviews is a topic I love, and I'd love to dive into some other time. So if you're interested in that, there's a lot of talk we can have about how to manage bad reviews. Bad reviews aren't all bad. Studies show actually that if you had only positive reviews, people who read that actually are a little skeptical. They feel better when you have a negative review in there, here and there. It makes it feel more real. So don't get totally disheartened when you get one. And if you're interested in a webinar on managing online reviews, how to handle negative reviews, let us know in the survey after, and I'm happy to put that together for you. Again, you've got to communicate though. I can't say this enough. My heart breaks when I see so many practices doing incredible things and their patients don't know about it. If the patients were aware of it, they would totally be coming in or flocking to them. So once you've found out any concerns, go ahead and just kind of address those and then let patients know how you're changing things. That does not mean, and I'm going to put this out there, you don't need to tell them like, hey, John thought that our bathroom was nasty, so now we've cleaned it. You don't need to tell them that there were negative reviews on it or something like that. You can just say, hey, we're super excited to share with you some of our amazing new cleaning processes that are taking place. It's like going into our bathroom, it just shines. It makes me so happy. Just share the changes you're making rather than the concerns that were originally there. Again, newsletters, text messages, social media, on your website, all those kind of communication areas. Whenever you're doing something new, cover all of them. All right, so let's also talk about adding new services. This is an area that I think anytime during a downturn, people get a little bit nervous. I think we all do it personally as well as in business. We kind of hold on to our money and be like, oh, I need to save everything. Where what studies actually show the opposite's true. If you invest just a little bit, like don't go out and spend all your money, but you invest a little bit in certain services, in certain innovations, things like that, you actually are way more successful in the long run than your competitors. And not just post downturn, but during the downturn. So if you have a little bit of money that you can spare, I totally recommend investing just a bit in services. These are kind of things. So when we go back to the very beginning and I talked about like the high profit margin procedures, especially if you're not doing a ton of those, or if you feel like maybe your particular patient base isn't really requiring those, any of that kind of thing, that's where you may want to think, I need to add some additional services that are these high profit margin procedures. Here's some of my recommendations if you're looking for these. Research online, your specialty. see what kind of things people are doing, talk to colleagues. You can reach out to universities. Universities, I think, are great resources that people don't always use. Go to your alma mater and find out, what kind of trends are they seeing? What kind of new options are out there? Look at practices across the country. One thing I've run into a lot is that it seems like an idea will, somebody has a great idea in Boston or something, and then the other people in Boston kind of hear about it, it spreads, and now suddenly they've got sort of a little area going that's doing something cool, but maybe way over in San Francisco, they don't know anything about it. They haven't heard about it. So check on different areas of the country, kind of see what things are going on in those areas. And then one thing I really recommend, especially for dental, is to don't be boxed in by your specialty. There are a lot of things you can do that are outside of the box. And I've got a few lists of these. Some of these may or may not work for you, depending on your specialty, but things like a med spa treatment, Botox. I go to an ophthalmologist quite regularly for an eye condition I have, and they totally offer like Botox and stuff. And I did not feel like that was a very compatible specialty, but that's fine. You're there anyway, you see it, you think about going. If you can dispense your prescriptions in the office, these are all ones that all of these ideas are things that research has shown tend to be high profit margin procedures. So I know that in the dental industry, you don't have tons of prescriptions, but you do have, their codeine and your antibiotics and some of those kind of specific things. If you can dispense them in the office, that's a great way to make good money. Things like holistic medicine, opening 24-hour options. You can charge a lot more for patients who are needing care after hours. So this doesn't even mean you have to be on site, like have someone there physically, but you could be available, that if somebody needed to come in the night, that you would be willing to go down there. Lab work, if you have any sort of lab work stuff, that's obviously way more for people who are having, kind of more medical things, blood work, diabetics, stuff like that. But you can also do diagnostics, x-rays, anything you can think of that are profitable, high profit margin procedures that may fit with you. That's great. Okay, next, you need to take a closer look at those little insignificant things. These are just those small things that seem like, that was just like a dime. But, those nickels and dimes, quarters, pennies, they actually kind of add up a lot over time and end up creating some losses. So some of these things include stuff like paper. We use a huge amount of paper every year. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars can be lost just from paper. $120 billion in the healthcare industry is spent on printed forms each year. I mean, that's insane, especially when you think of people like me, your worst patient ever, who brings in their billions of kids all at once and then doesn't even look at your bill you sent me in the mail. So, people want to be digital, take advantage of that and save some money. Down coding, I get this, like I totally get this. We are all a little bit nervous about audits, and so we sometimes code a little bit cautiously in fear that maybe we're going to get audited. But that being said, the average doctor loses $40,000 a year that they should have gotten if they just coded correctly. So if you feel like you're kind of undercoding or cautiously coding, I would recommend having a documentation specialist come in, kind of review your coding, do a little training, and then you guys just code accurately to the highest level. I wouldn't expect to take my car to the mechanic and that they don't charge me for what their actual work. You guys are working hard out there, so code for what you deserve. Overtime is another big one. It adds up fast. I mean, it's something that if you're not kind of keeping an eye on it, suddenly you'll realize you've spent a whole lot of money. So to kind of help with this, I always say, get approval. Always require that your employees have approval before they work overtime. Adjust your schedules. So if you see that they legit are needing to work overtime, see what you can do to adjust your schedules to fix that problem, and take advantage of automation. There are a lot of things that we can automate today. Phone calls, we don't need to be spending 5 hours on the phone. We can be sending out text reminders or whatever it is. We can even be two-way texting back and forth with patients rather than talking to them on the phone. That saves a huge amount of time. So try to use electronic, automation, digital. All of that is going to save you a lot of time, especially if you're struggling with overtime. So we're going to do a quick poll. This is one that I'm super curious about as well. Alan, you can go ahead and share this. Are you reviewing these kind of like little expenses, at least quarterly? It's okay if you're not. I understand that, all of us are a little bit slow sometimes. So I'm going to let you rest from my voice for a minute while Alan shares that. All right, Alan, why don't you go ahead and close that for us? Let us see the results. Ah, very interesting. So we are right, 50-50. So obviously, great job. Big applause from me for those of you who are reviewing these kind of things. Keep at it. It is important, even if, it seems like not the most fun thing to do. For those of you who aren't, these are great things to make sure you're kind of keeping an eye on, especially if you're struggling with revenue. Those small things really do add up big. Okay, and we're gonna move on. Make sure everybody can see my screen. Okay, great. So the next thing we need to do is optimize our schedules. This includes both your employee schedules and your patient schedules. Okay? There are things that you can do. The number of patients you're seeing, the cadence of patients, all of that has a big impact on profitability. So first thing that I recommend doing with your patient schedules is to kind of figure out where your problem spots are. It's going to vary again based on your own practice, but are you seeing too many no-shows? If you are, what I say is start testing out the way you're reminding people. Maybe you send text messages instead of calling. Maybe you adjust the frequency of your reminders. Maybe you're sending maybe one reminder is not enough. Maybe you're sending so many that they're just, ignoring them. Look at the days that you're sending them. Typically, we recommend, again, our data analysts looked at all of some millions of messages that Solution Reach has sent as reminders to try to see if there are certain ones that were the most effective. And we've gone with the 3-3-3 method is what we call it. What seems to be most effective is sending 3 reminders, doing it at 3 weeks before the appointment, 3 days before, and 3 hours before. So if you have no idea where to start, I always say make that as your starting point and then kind of test from there. If one of your problems is that you're having holes in your schedule, I totally recommend doing online scheduling. So online scheduling, the reason this is important here is because studies show that the majority of appointments people schedule online are for the same day or for the next day. So they really, really, really work on filling those holes in your schedule. People will tend to be like, okay, I really need to go see the dentist. Oh, look, they have an appointment, say at 3, boom, done. So that's a great way to fill schedules, and it makes it way easier for you. Again, you're not on the phone. If you're having a ton of cancellations, some practices have that issue. Make sure you're using a wait list. If you haven't been, start one. If you are using it, make sure, if you have been taking one, make sure you use it. So if patients cancel, you can go ahead and fill that slot with somebody on your wait list. Now, there are a lot of different methods people use to schedule their patients. This is one that is quite popular and works generally pretty well. So if you're looking at an idea of, okay, what's the best way to schedule patients to be most efficient? Think of scheduling from noon out. So that means this says 12, 11, 10, 9, and 12, 1, 2, 3. Obviously, your appointments aren't every hour, but, scheduling down that way. So 12, 12:45, 12:30, however, 12, 12:15, 12, 11:45. schedule up and down, because what that does is it leaves if you have large sections of holes, it's going to leave your gaps at the end or the beginning of the day. That allows you to either come in late, leave early. It'll save on payment for times when maybe you have big breaks and everybody's just sitting around, and so that you can adjust that way. Obviously, you're going to have patients who are like, I can only be seen at 4:55 on the third Tuesday of the month. It's fine. This is just kind of a rule of thumb that you could aim for it. And maybe if 1 day out of 5 it ended up working perfectly, awesome. You got that day where you were able to leave early or start late, something like that. So that's a good way to kind of make your schedule a little bit more efficient. Also, especially for you guys in the dental industry, try consolidating visits. If you can get multiple things accomplished in a single visit, you're going to save on materials, labor. You've got supplies and PPE, and you're having to have the hygienist, and you've got to have, all of that. If you can get 2 crowns done at the same time, it's going to be a lot more of a high profit procedure for you than if you split it between 2 visits. I know that's not always comfortable for patients, so you have to play with that and patient satisfaction as well. But if they're open to it, for sure, jump on board with that. And then finally, the last thing is telehealth. Telehealth, I feel like we've talked about it a ton recently, and that's normal because the pandemic hit and we have just experienced things we haven't ever experienced. So that includes telehealth. It has exploded during the pandemic. And the thing that's interesting is experts really think that it's here to stay. And you have to kind of throw in the idea that if there's a possibility, if you do need to limit your hours again, or the fact that patients are feeling nervous. When we talked about the survey earlier, if you're seeing a lot of safety concerns, telehealth is something that's going to help with that. Fortunately, in general, telehealth being here to stay is a good thing. It typically has really good profit margins. One of the interesting trends that I've seen is I've talked to a lot of practices, and I'd love at some point, this is such a new emerging trend that's been happening that we don't have all the data on it yet. But one thing I'm getting anecdotally from a lot of different practices is that the appointments are much shorter. So I talked with a practice recently who had to do almost all telehealth as the pandemic started, and suddenly they were seeing the same number of patients but finishing 2 hours early every day. And so eventually they just added more patients, but it was simply that when you're doing a telehealth, a virtual visit, it seems to be a lot faster than doing one in person. You also get cost savings on things like PPE and supplies and stuff. Now, in the dental industry, I know there's a lot of hesitation and concern and just like, oh, how do we have a virtual visit? How do I clean your teeth? Or how? Obviously there are lots of cases where you can't use telehealth in the dental industry. In addition, there are certain states that don't even allow it, Texas being one of the big ones. If you're in Texas, they do not allow dental telehealth. But for the most part, it is available. And there are lots of great ways to use it, especially in ways that maybe you guys were doing things and not getting paid before, follow-ups, calling to check and see how a patient was doing after some oral surgery, things like that, that can actually be billed as telehealth visits. So limited oral evaluations, follow-up visits, consultations of any sort. All of these are really great things to do as a telehealth visit. I also want to throw in, I don't have this in here, but I know there's a lot of orthodontics that is also taking place by telehealth. So you can do those consultations, or if there's questions or if things going on that way, you can totally do it telehealth wise. So I think it's kind of an exciting and interesting shift, and I think that we're going to see this continue to stick around. So for our final poll, I would just love to know, are you using telehealth? And if not, is this something that you think is going to stick around? Is this something that's that you're going to do in the future? It's just really exciting for me. So Alan, go ahead and open that. And we will see. how we are doing. All right, we're going to wait another second. All right, go ahead and show us the results. Okay, so this is probably pretty much what I expected. I'm impressed that 13% of you are using telehealth. That's fantastic. And I'd love to, if you've got thoughts or, share it in the questions, let us know what it is you're doing and how it's working. And if I would love, I'm with the 39% of you who would like to in the future. I think it's going to expand. And I think that we're kind of just on the cusp of figuring out all the best uses for it. But I really think that, especially if you can get paid for things that maybe were just a phone call and you didn't get paid for in the past, that's going to be really great. All right, and so that pretty much concludes today's webinar. If you want to hop off, you are welcome to. I'm going to share a few more things of kind of some exciting things that we're doing at Solution Reach that I would love to have you stay around for. But thank you so much always for joining us. I'd love to hear from you. First thing I want to talk about that's coming up next month is our Solution Reach User Summit. It's called Solution Teach Virtual User Summit. This is something that we do on an annual basis, and it's really fun. I will be teaching a course there. There's just all kinds of educational classes, as well as things that specifically kind of dive into the Solution Reach platform. If you are a Solution Reach customer, for sure, I recommend you go. It's free and you can learn a ton. So if you register by the 25th of this month, you'll also be entered in for a chance to win a $100 Amazon gift card. You really have nothing to lose with this. I've seen it, I'm a part of it. It's really fun. So in addition, if you were listening today and you were interested in finding out more about Solution Reach, if you join us for a 15-minute demo, we're happy to give you Amazon gift cards. So there's links for if you're a customer, links for if you're not a customer. Join us for that. That would be fantastic. And finally, I just want to say, please reach out at any time. I am here always to answer questions. Like I told you, a lot of my job is simply helping out, helping you know what sort of things you need help with and getting those answers for you. So I have people email me questions all the time. In fact, I'm going to include my email. You can email me directly. I have an entire video series that's simply people who email me questions, and I put together quick videos to answer them. They do not have to be anything to do with Solution Reach. Just any questions you have about running your practice. I know that a lot of people just don't know where to turn, so I am happy to be that resource for you. At the end of the webinar, you will get a survey that will be sent to you. One really fun thing that's happening right now is everybody who fills out this survey is entered into a drawing to get some AirPods. So totally, I mean, the survey, again, it's like 5 questions. So fill it out, let us know what you thought of this webinar. And if you have ideas for other webinars, we'd love to hear from us. And otherwise, just happy Thursday. I hope you guys have a great end of the week and a fantastic weekend.
Thank you so much, Lori. This was great. And everyone can also learn more about Solution Reach on our Patterson Dental website too. And thank you so much, Lori. There were really good nuggets in here and really great tips that we can all take forward now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Erin.